don't know what to do with themselves. Reward prediction error says you always need the dopamine at the final stage to exceed all the little bits of dopamine you got en route to that reward, or you will actually be disappointed. You'll experience a sort of postpartum depression of sorts. So the key is learn to attach reward to the effort process. I'm not David Goggins' psychologist, but I do know David, and he's come out to my lab before. We've had some conversations. I don't know what his process is, except as he's described it. But I have the sense, based on what I know about neuroscience and knowing a little bit about his story and having read his book, that he's learned to attach some sort of internal reward mechanism to the pursuit and friction process. It's not about feeling good about some external milestone. It's about learning how to tap into this engine that we have. And I actually do believe that in knowing some people from the special operations community, that this is actually one of the things that they are selected for is not just grit or resilience. It's actually this ability to reward oneself internally in their mind as a way to buffer the effort process. It gives them more gas, more of an engine. And it's not just special operations. People that make it through cancer treatment, people that raise a special needs child or make it through a tough stage of economics in their life. Many people are probably in that situation right now. Sure. It's about learning how to take that strain, the feeling that you're being something or some force or some life force is trying to push you back on your heels, and learning how to use self-reward, not delusional thinking, but self-reward as a means to get more energy to continue to plow forward. It's a real thing.
Wow, so good. By the way, it's interesting you say that. When I interviewed David, we've become real good friends. We've done a lot of things together since that. He said something when I interviewed him that's along those lines, and it surprised me. I sort of stared at him for a minute. We were talking about the endurance races that he does. And he goes, and I don't care if I win. And I just stared at him. He goes, I'm more concerned with the fact that I'm making the effort and that I finish. And I thought, wow, that's exactly along the lines. It was actually the thing that stood out to me when we were having that conversation. And it's, you just
that's
said
it in a nutshell. Yeah,
that's it.
Growth. That's the real growth mindset. A lot of people, hashtag growth mindset is one of the most popular hashtags in social media, but most people don't actually know what it means. And again, this is Carol Dweck's discovery, not mine. It was discovered in a group of kids that were doing math problems or other kinds of puzzles that they knew they couldn't get right, but they enjoyed doing them, and they perform exceedingly well on lots of sorts of tests of that sort when there is the right answer, of course. And so what they do is they're wired for effort. They're wired for the puzzle, not for the solution. And when I say puzzle, I don't mean the noun puzzle. I mean the verb for being puzzled. It, for them, feels good. And so we need to think, if we're talking about the nervous system and we want to make it actionable for high performance, whether or not it's in business or sport or otherwise, we want to think in terms of processes, not events, and verbs, not nouns. So growth mindset as a verb, as an action item, reward as a verb, not just as you're going to just pat yourself on the back. It's what you internalize. It's a process. That's how the neural circuits that underlie reward get stronger. And the beauty of the brain is that you have this thing of neuroplasticity, which is its ability to change itself throughout the whole lifespan. And the more you practice this, the better you get at it. And it does not mean you're walking around talking delusionally about how great life is when everything is terrible. It means you might even be very stoic. You might be, hopefully you're very rational, but you have the energy to continue to push forward. Whereas other people are going to be dropping out because everybody shows up gritty and resilient, and they watch their inspirational, aspirational story. One of the big motivations for me being here today and in general of my lab is to try and make these concepts from psychology and personal development and high achievement to make them what we call operational, meaning give them definitions that people can grab onto and apply, and not just have to watch, 50, everyone loves the Rocky movie. I mean, it makes you feel really good. It makes you feel like anything's possible, but you don't always have access to that.
By the way, it's amazing that you just said that, because I was reflecting, brother, I love when energy's prevalent, even on Zoom. While you were talking, I was thinking about David and I talking again. We were both, as kids, these crazy Rocky fans. We both watched Rocky 1 and 2 literally thousands of times. And what we were both struck by in the movie is exactly what you're describing. It wasn't Rocky winning. It's this time where Apollo Creed knocks him down. He puts his arms up and he thinks he's won the fight. I get emotional even saying it. And it's a movie. And Sly's a buddy of mine. And I know he's an actor, you know. And you turn back and Apollo Creed looks at Rocky and he starts to get back up again. And Creed's just like, what? And the inspirational aspect of that, Rocky wasn't winning, was the effort deposit, was the pursuit, right? And so, guys, if you've ever heard about this before, like this is scientific proof that you've got to be giving yourself the reward for the effort deposit. Now, one of these things about neuroplasticity that I want to talk about changing, like I think there's a lot of people listening to this, brother, who go, look, man, I've just not had any winning streaks. You know, I've not learned to win. One of the reasons that what Andrew's saying is so important is I think we're conditioned as young people that the dopamine only comes when we hit the home run, when we bring home the A. That's when mom and dad are proud of us. That's when we got the dopamine hit. And there was not a lot in the raising of children. And those of you that have children should be thinking through this. If what Andrew's saying is true, how critical it is that you begin to show rewards for effort with your children rather than just the recital, rather than just the performance. I think of Tiger Woods, the greatest winner in the history of golf. And what does he usually say? I'm just trusting the process. Even when he was going through swing changes, he got the hit from the process. He doesn't even talk about winning, even though he's been the greatest winner. What does he always say? I want to put myself in a position on Sunday on the back nine where I've got a shot. That's what he says. Yeah. So if you're looking
he's
for
a great example. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead, please.
You know, Tiger was at Stanford, right? I think it's interesting. We used to, because I grew up in this area, I used to go watch him drive. And I'm not a golf player, but it's super impressive. What's interesting, and I think we could validate this. I don't want to put out things that aren't true, but what I heard was that, you know, there was discussion about him collecting an honorary degree and he actually declined it.
I heard this too. Yes.
You know, and that's really interesting. It speaks exactly to what you're saying. So the reward process, again, I know I said this earlier, but the reward process is critical. We need to reward our efforts, but we need to make sure that our internal rewards, the ones that are milestones and put us on our path, the ones that are associated with effort, are greater than the external rewards that we ever give ourselves. This could be about going out and buying yourself, you know, I bought myself the truck I always wanted when I got tenure. You know, I did. But really, we have to be careful with external rewards, because if you want to continue to perform well, you have to foster this internal reward mechanism. That's what's going to allow you to continue to perform well.
Okay, now
and so no external reward.
That may now have become my favorite thing we said on the show too, because this external thing, the reward, is an element of the social media world that I do think has some danger to it. I just want to stay on one point. I know I interrupted you again. I'm sorry, because we're on Zoom, guys, so there's a tendency to do this a little bit more. But the question comes up, can I learn to win? And I've looked for evidence that somebody, a being, can actually be reprogrammed to win. And I think I kind of found it in something you talked about, which was, would you mind sharing with them the story of the two mice in the tube? And how I'll just let you tell it, but if you're listening to going, can I ever learn to win? Can I change my current way I am? Because the neuroplasticity is a fact. It's a complicated word, but for the sake of your belief, everybody, this story I think will give you some hope. Ironically, I'm using the story in a different way than you've told it before, but I think you know where I'm going. Tell them about these two mice in the tube and how one was changed by just winning once.
Yeah, so there's a classic experiment in behavioral biology called the tube test, where you take two mice, you put them in a tube, and they try and push each other out. They fight for that tube. And one mouse inevitably pushes out the other mouse. The one that stays in the tube is the winner. The one that got pushed out is called the loser. What's interesting is that if you take those same mice and give them new competitors, the one that won has a much higher than chance probability of being a winner the subsequent battle, what's called a battle. The loser has a much higher probability of losing. Now that's the first experiment. And you go, okay, well, winners become winners, losers become losers. But it's actually far more interesting than that. Because if you take the loser and you put him against even a known winner, and you push the loser from behind, the loser becomes the winner and the winner becomes the loser. And even if the effort that the loser that became the winner exerted wasn't their own, right? You've got a human pushing with a stick on this little mouse. So the important thing is the third experiment, which only arrived a few years ago. This is an experiment that was published in the journal Science Science and nature are our Super Bowl and NBA championships of science. Very 99% rejection rates, very stringent, thoroughly peer reviewed, not just any publications. A laboratory, not mine, unfortunately, did the experiment where they monitored the brains of these mice while they were engaging in this tube test battle. And they found that there was one brain area, it's a subregion of the prefrontal cortex, not the whole prefrontal cortex, that's more active in the winner and less active in the loser. So much so that if you chemically or electrically activate this brain area in the loser, that loser becomes the winner. If you quiet this brain area in the winner, or an animal that's about to win, it suddenly becomes the loser. So you say, what in the world is this brain area doing to the body and to the psychology of these mice? Now, we don't know the psychology of the mice, but they did do some important controls. And it's not testosterone. Although there's a testosterone increase associated with winning, it is not testosterone in the moment. Okay. It's not cortisol. It's not any of the other normal things that you might look to. It's not muscle strength. It turns out that stimulation of this brain area that causes winning is associated with increased anxiety, effort, and adrenaline. And all it does is it converts that anxiety into more steps forward per unit time. Literally just steps forward. So if you take this brain area and you quiet it for a given level of stress, the animal backs up a little bit more or pauses a little bit more. If you stimulate this brain area for the same amount of stress, the animal advances a little bit more as opposed to pauses or backs up. And the thing that's really key to take away from this for everyone's individual lives and goals is that if you really think about it, you always have only three options. You can either be stationary, you can back up, you can retreat, or you can go forward. And you want to move forward in an adaptive way. You don't want to walk off a cliff or do something stupid financially or physically, but anxiety and stress and what we call autonomic arousal were designed to move us. They create a sense of agitation and discomfort for a reason, but it wasn't just designed to move us to run and hide. It was also designed to move us forward. And a lot of people take the agitation, the fear, the anxiety about starting something new, and they try and work with that and push down on it. There's just so much in our culture that's about trying to get homeostasis, a word that I really despise, that homeostasis and trying to get back to this place of calm or flow so that they can move forward. And what they don't appreciate, or what people haven't been told because the science is very new, is that all forms of adaptive behavior in the animal kingdom and in humans, whether or not it's with the mind or the body or both, involve a fairly high level of stress and anxiety that was designed to move us forward. And it doesn't have to be just competition and battle. This could be writing your book. This could be finding the mate that you want to find, a life mate. It could be any number of different things that you're going to pursue. There's always anxiety associated with that. And trying to bypass that could actually represent the failure of our species. I actually worry that if humans keep seeking for these comfort zones at the outset of effort, we could actually devolve as opposed to evolve. Wow. And if I don't want to get geopolitical, but if we look at countries right now that are hard charging toward higher status in the world, like China, they embody this in their social psychology. The United States, and I'm a patriot, so I'm going to just speak from the heart here, was founded on the idea that we do this as a culture, as individuals. And it's not about being ruthless or being unethical. It's about taking the notion that it's not supposed to feel good at the beginning, folks. It doesn't feel good for any animal. It's not supposed to feel good for you and me. And I will balance this with something about restoration and recovery of this process, but it's so vital. And I think it's why the movie Rocky, why cancer survivors, why the Rosa Parks story, why David Goggins, why these stories evoke such a deep sense of inspiration in us, is because it's as tapping into something as vital and primitively important as thirst or hunger or the desire to mate. It's at the core of how we got to where we are, and it's at the core of how we're going to move forward. And there, forgive me for getting a little soapboxy, but I do believe this at that these are fundamentals of biology, and we need to respect them if we're going to evolve.
The validation is unbelievable. No, I've always thought, you watch an athlete do something heroic and it brings you to tears almost. And I've always felt like there's this part of us intuitively that seeks it, and also that knows we have the capacity to do likewise in our own way. And we seek that. What a beautiful sense. Is that part of the brain, the thalamus, or am I on a completely different path in the brain?
No, so the prefrontal cortex is just kind of frontal real estate. We have a lot more of it than mice do. It's the area of the brain that actually causes humans a lot of neurotic discomfort because it's so good at thinking and multi-tracking. Just a little fun tidbit: we can multi-track, we can multitask. Anyone says that you can't multitask has never picked up a neuroscience textbook. There's something called covert attention. We can split our attention between two things very easily. I can look at you, for instance, and I can monitor the periphery of the room at the same time if I wanted to. I can also bring my full attention to just our conversation, which is what I'm doing. So we can split our attention. We can multitask. What we need to do is, when we want to get better at something, we need to bring our full attention to that thing. Yeah. Okay. And we need to start to engage this internal reward process. I just want to briefly say about internal versus external rewards. Yeah. The car you've always wanted, the watch you've always wanted, the piece of jewelry you've always wanted, the reward is still internal. You don't take that watch and cram it in your ear and dopamine gets released. The dopamine release is always internal. The key is to learn how to attach some internal process of thinking and self-reward to the release of dopamine. And the brain wants to do that. It wants to learn how to do that. But as long as we're backing away from anxiety, stress, and trying to get super calm at the front end of the pursuit, then there's no way you can get there. You're in a pause mode or retreat mode. You are the losing mouse. You want to be the winning mouse. You want to take more steps forward per unit time. That's all it is.
So good. All right, I got to go through some random things I get to ask you about and my audience gets to listen, okay? So not rapid fire, but like I got a few things I want to ask you about. Their efficiencies, do they work? Can we improve when we use these things? What do you think of acetylcholine?
Acetylcholine is the neuromodulator associated with attention. Mm-hmm. It is a vital to the neuroplasticity process. Neuroplasticity just being the brain changing adaptively. Typically, we mean adaptively in response to experience. Brain injuries, neuroplasticity too, but think adaptive plasticity. Acetylcholine is released from multiple places in the brain, and there's a little place in the base of the brain called nucleus basalis, which means base, that releases acetylcholine when we are paying a lot of attention to something and we subjectively tell ourselves it's super important. Like, I need to do this in order to eat tomorrow, or I need to do this for whatever reason, whatever meaning you attach to it. That acetylcholine marks those neurons for getting stronger later so that they reflexively engage. You could, in theory, increase levels of acetylcholine in your brain and get more neuroplasticity. There's a very famous Nobel Prize winning neuroscientist who choose Nicorette specifically for this purpose because Nicorette stimulates the nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. I don't recommend smoking. Some people smoke to accomplish this. It's a double-edged sword, though, because you want to increase acetylcholine primarily through thoughts and behaviors and bringing focus, and I can explain how to do that. You actually want to bring more visual focus if you're sighted, or auditory focus if you're non-sighted, blind individual, but you want to bring more visual focus to what you're doing, which will bring more acetylcholine to the particular synapses and brain connections that you want to change. And that doesn't require ingesting anything. Now, if you ramp up the levels of acetylcholine in the system using a supplement like alpha GPC or a choline donor of some sort, there's some breakdown in the gut, but there are increases in acetylcholine and activation of these nicotinic receptors that can enhance the plasticity process. That's a real thing. And, the nootropic space is kind of an emerging space about smart drugs and things like that. I think I always say, start with behaviors and thoughts, because those are in your power. That's where the real power is. Then nutrition. There are ways to increase acetylcholine. Typically, meat and nuts in particular can increase acetylcholine. Doesn't mean eat 3 ribeyes, because then you'll just pass out from fatigue. Too much blood in your gut. But then supplementation can be a positive force in this. Then if there's a clinical need, or if it's in I'm not a doctor, so drugs, right? There are prescription drugs that can do this, and people do that for treatment of clinical disorders and Alzheimer's in particular to bring more focus and memory. So acetylcholine is really the molecule of focus, and you want to have focus when you are trying to engage plasticity or learn anything. You need alertness and you need focus. You need urgency and focus together. And if you're too stressed, you won't be able to focus. You need to bring that urgency level up, but then you just dial it in. And if you want to get better at focusing, do what the experts do. Put a little crosshatch on a piece of paper across the room and gradually extend the amount of time that you can focus your visual attention on it. And as you get up to higher and higher levels, you can bring that same level of visual focus to any kind of other thing that you're doing.
That's how one expands visual focus. I thought you were going to say, I thought you meant visualization of something specific that you want. That's
visualization tends to be very hard to keep in mind for some people. Some people are very good at visualization. Yeah. There's a guy in the 80s named Roger Shepard, also at Stanford. It sounds like I'm shamelessly plugging stuff. We have a lot of good people. What can I say? My colleagues are amazing. I'm always humbled by them, who did studies of mental visualization. And some people are very good at mental visualization. Other people really struggle to stay focused in the visualization. Okay. So start with the visual system. There are only two pieces of your brain outside your skull, and those are your eyes. These are literally two pieces of central nervous system. And if you don't believe me, come to my neuroanatomy class. I'll show you. They are connected to the brain. They guide the alertness of the brain or the sleepiness of the brain. There's a reason why your eyes flutter and close when you're getting sleepy, folks, is because open eyes is alertness. It tends to, and visual focus brings cognitive focus. Mm-hmm. And you look at any sports event and look at the eyes of like Michael Jordan in this recent documentary on Netflix. He's just totally dialed in visually. Right? Now he can expand his gaze when he needs to pass the ball, but visual focus drives cognitive focus.
So good. Okay, so staying on that topic, you're going down my list here. Blue and yellow light. Would you talk about that a minute when you're talking about, getting eyes closed and getting to sleep? The impacts. I mean, this is awesome right here, everybody. The real impact of blue and yellow light and its origins too.
Yeah. So let's start with the don'ts. So here's why you don't want to view lights of any color, blue or otherwise, that are too bright between the hours of 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. The reason is there's a study published by my good friend Samer Hattar, who's head of the chronobiology unit at the National Institutes of Mental Health. So he's a heavy hitter. He found that blue light and bright lights of all kinds in the middle of the night, if you look at them too often, there's a neuron in your eye that signals to a brain area called the habenula, H-A-B-E-N-U-L-A, that literally suppresses the amount of dopamine in the brain and gives depressive-like symptoms and impairments in learning and memory for about 2 days that follow. Now, if you look at some light once in a while in the middle of the night, you go to the bathroom, no big deal. But if you're up in the middle of the night and looking at lights of any color, not just blue light, and those lights are bright enough, you're going to suppress your dopamine levels, and it can lead to bad places. So on average, try not to do that. If you're a night shift worker, you might want to use blue blockers. Blue blockers for some people can be helpful in just reducing the overall brightness of light in the evening, but lowering the dimming the lights in the evening and actually setting lights low in your environment, not having overhead lights, is good because the cells that read this stuff out are and signal the brain are in the lower half of the retina, which views the upper visual field. So that I suggest to almost everybody. The flip side of that is during the daytime, in particular within the first hour of waking, you want to get as much bright light stimulation of the eyes as you possibly can. You don't want it to ever be painful, okay? So if it's painful, you're injuring the retina, and you don't want that. But bright light. Ideally, you get outside. Through a window, you're only going to get about 1,000, what's called about 1,000 lux, which is a measure of intensity of light. Outside, it's about 50,000. Even on a cloudy day in Boston in winter, you're getting more light through those clouds outside than you are with a bright light inside. And it's very important because early in the day, your brain needs to wake up. Your whole system, your biology needs to wake up, and it does that by releasing cortisol in a bump early in the day. That's a good cortisol release. And it sets a timer so that melatonin, which is the sleepy hormone, comes on about 16 hours later. We know from a lot of studies that if you don't get that bright light during the early part of the day, you get a second cortisol bump at 9 p.m. And that second cortisol bump is very closely associated with anxiety, depression, feelings of kind of low affect later. So the things I'm talking about right now are slow. They're slow acting. They work over the course of days or weeks. And so a lot of times it's like people will stay up late watching a movie till 2 or 3 in the morning. Fine, do that. Enjoy life. Go out dancing. Now no one does that. But
right, eventually,
when it's safe to do it or whatever your protocol is, enjoy life. But if you're chronically getting a lot of light in the middle of the night and you're not getting a lot of bright light in your eyes early in the day, you're wearing dark sunglasses all day, or you're coming inside and you're not getting that bright light stimulation from sunlight, you're setting yourself up for low affect and mental health issues, and worse, perhaps, or at least just as bad, the habenula, this brain area, has connections to the pancreas. You start disrupting blood sugar rhythms. And people start getting hungry in the middle of the night. It's associated with type 2 diabetes. There's a paper published in the journal Nature last year. So look, these two pieces of brain were designed to see objects, but their first job was to tell the rest of the brain and nervous system and body when to be alert, when to be awake, how to run its digestive system, its immune system. Get that bright light early in the day for just 5-10 minutes. Just go outside and get that bright light. Drag your kids out there. You don't have to do it at sunrise. You don't have to see the sun crossing the horizon, but there's so much data to support these behaviors that I'm